Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Wednesday, July 23rd. I'm Andrew Waldworth, and joining me are Real Clear Politics President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. Guys, Tulsi Gabbard released new documents today that she says further supports the accusation that Barack Obama weaponized intelligence to delegitimize Trump at the start of his first term. This follows on last night when Obama responded to Trump, who had accused him early in that day of treason. So a spokesman for Obama's office said this. He said the former president's office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response, but these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. So, Tom, inasmuch as conviction for treason carries the death penalty, what do you make of this accusation from Trump?
I think there is evidence to suggest, this is what Tulsi Gabbard has released and is talking about, that Obama, did have this meeting, did call for this, ICA, Intelligence Community Assessment, that was produced in January of 2016, just days before Trump took office. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. This is one of those stories that we live in two separate worlds, we're watching two separate movies. If you're an Obama supporter, you think, just like Barack Obama says, this is all nonsense. It's preposterous. It's a conspiracy theory, etc. If you're a Trump supporter, you believe what Trump says, which is that Obama directed this. It was treasonous. He should be held accountable. He should be frog marched out of the White House. And so it's tough to. This is one of those stories that depends how you feel about it and how you react to it. Depends on where you sit on the political spectrum. And for the independents and non-ideological folks, it is a story that has a lot of detail to it and a lot of intrigue. And so unless you're paying close attention to it, it's probably going right over your head and you're not that concerned about it. So I'm not sure that it's going to move public opinion. I think people have a lot of fixed opinions about what they believe about the story. But look, from my perspective, given everything the way the media has gone, I want to see more. I want to hear more. I think there are legitimate questions that should be asked and answered. Does that mean Barack Obama is going to get, again, thrown in jail or executed because of treason? No. But it is one of those things. There is a problem in our government. There has been a problem with it being weaponized. And so a lot of these claims strike me as perfectly plausible and deserving of more investigation.
Carl, just the politics of it for a minute. Is this just Trump? This sort of Trumpian overreach where we go right from, they're weaponized national intelligence, it's a bad thing, maybe some people should testify in front of the Hill and find out what happened, to the former president should be held accountable for treason. I mean, it sort of feeds into a democratic narrative, which is sort of easy to push back against. I'm just wondering, is Trump his own worst enemy at this when he sort of makes it easy for Democrats and independents and maybe even some Republicans say, oh gosh, Trump's gilding the lily, although I know that's not the proper use of that phrase. You're going to point that out right now.
Gilding gold, painting the lily, if you're trying to invoke Shakespeare, Andy.
Thank you.
I'm an independent, so Tom's right that Democrats and Republicans are in two separate worlds, but that's our job, is to try and explain to a candid world, to use Thomas Jefferson's phrase, what really happened. And is it counterproductive for Tulsi Gabbard and President Trump to use words like treason? I think so. They're on strong grounds when they say that the intelligence community and the FBI were weaponized during Trump's first term. I think that's been proven. I think it's a great scandal. But then they're doing the same thing. In my mind, they're weaponizing it by going too far. Obama, the reason they're mentioning the former President Obama today is because of this December 9th meeting. So it's a month after the election, 6 weeks before President Trump's going to be inaugurated for the first time. And the intelligence communities had not found evidence of Russian hacking, despite what the media said there was Russian hacking. Hacking in this context, meaning hacking into voting machines.
Right.
They had not found that. And we had Aaron Mate on the radio yesterday. There's a legitimate question whether Russia had even hacked the Democratic National Committee. That's assumed to be a fact. There's questions about all these things. But so on December 9th, President Obama basically gives the word. This isn't Tulsi Gabbard's report, and it's been established before. Let's have a broader look at this. Let's not just talk about hacking in terms of getting into machines. Now, this is the Democrats' view. This is the most benign view of this. Let's look at the broader picture and see if Russia tried to influence the election. And if so, who were they trying to help? That's perfectly legitimate. That's what Representative Heim said on the weekend show. That's the Democratic story. That's what Glenn Kessler wrote in the Washington Post. Here's the problem with it. And here's the weakness of the narrative. And here's where I think President Trump and Tulsi Gabbard have raised questions that need to be answered by these former administration officials. If they wanted a broader look and they were going to expedite it, so it was going to be out on January 17th was the goal, then why did those reports surface in the media the very next day, basically with already the conclusion of this supposed new investigation, broader investigation? That's, to me, suggests that they weren't acting in good faith and that they came out of this meeting, these people, and thought they had a green light from the president to go ahead and leak stuff, classified information to the media to try and undermine the incoming president. I don't know that that's treason, but if that's what happened, it's not very good. And those stories did appear the very next day, and they had this conclusion. And I remember reading the Washington Post story and finding it exceedingly unconvincing. We assessed that, this jargon they use where they don't have to use a name. They don't even use a sort of normal English sentence and a normal verb or a subject. They didn't say how they know this. We assessed that this happened supposedly one day after this investigation was supposed to be expanded. I think Tulsi Gabbard's raised a legitimate issue here, and I think the Democrats should not stonewall on it, and they ought to engage it.
And can I just add, as you look at this story, I mean, it is, I think, instructive to look at the players involved, right? James Comey. Well, we know James Comey. He does what was it, Carl? He doesn't use weasel moves or whatever.
I don't do weasel moves. While he's doing weasel moves.
The guy's kind of a weasel. James Clapper, right? John Brennan, who spied on Congress, lied about it. We now know he lied about the Steele dossier. We think there's now evidence that he perjured himself before Congress. Susan Rice, I mean, of Benghazi fame, who went on all 6 shows and absolutely lied to the American people. Barack Obama, I know, is seen in Democratic circles as a saint. And you remember it was always like, oh, he had the most scandal-free administration in history. It's like, well, that's not quite accurate either. And there were other aspects of his government. Remember Lois Lerner and the IRS targeting conservatives? There were other aspects of his government that were
Tom, that
weaponized.
was just a couple of Dilberts in Ohio.
Yeah, right. Of course. In the Cincinnati office. Yeah. No, I mean, so I think if you are a discerning sort of news consumer, that you have reason to be skeptical. And that some of these people that were involved in this have been kind of weaselly and have not been trustworthy or honest with the American people. And so just to take their word for it, including Barack Obama's, oh, this is just a distraction, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't pass muster with me. I think these things should be investigated. And if there's more information to be brought out, it should be brought out.
Carl, but what about, sort of ramping these up and going after the big guy himself? I mean, that seems to be where this narrative's changed in the last, 48 hours or so, maybe before that. I've been out a little bit, but it does seem like, it's one thing to go after Clapper and co. It's another to sort of go directly after Barack Obama.
I agree. Right? I agree with you. And, I think President Trump feels aggrieved. He feels that he was victimized by these people. I understand that. But he used that word retribution. This has a whiff of retribution to it. And that's a word he used himself during the campaign. I will be some of the Democratic talking heads, legacy media people say, oh, this is a retribution tour. And Trump seized on this. Said, I'll be your retribution. He turned around. He basically said, I'll be seeking vengeance on your behalf, meaning the people who voted for him. But that's not the right way to run the government. And it's one thing to be a candidate. We've talked about this before. It's another thing to be a president. He's not acting presidential in this regard. And his point of view would be that Barack Obama didn't act presidential when he sicked these dogs on him and tried to ruin his presidency before it even began. I understand why Trump's angry. You said at the top of the show, Andy, I think less is more.
Right.
Treason, you don't need to even use words like that. And it does undermine his argument. I think their approach ought to be, we want to find out what happened.
Just quickly, Tom.
Well, he thinks he knows what happened. He said that yesterday. We caught him red-handed.
Yeah.
And this is another example, real quick, Andy, if I could, of, one of those statements Trump makes. Remember when he first came out, Obama spied on my campaign. Everyone's like, oh, please, that's complete bullshit. And then it turns out, oh, well, actually it did happen. And, the virus came from China. Oh, that's racist. You can't say that. That's complete BS. Turns out, there are a number of examples where Trump says these over the top statements and people react to them and say, oh, it can't possibly be true. And then over time we find out. So this to me is another one of those. Barack Obama committed treason. It's like, well, okay. And then maybe, at the end of this, we'll find out that there was more to that statement than initially, people thought.
Yeah, just quickly on the internal politics, this must be good for Tulsi Gabbard's standing in the White House these days. There were some questions.
You were worried about her over the Ukraine stuff,
right? Yeah, and here she is. This has got to make her a hero in one man's heart, at least. Wouldn't you say, Tom?
Well, think about Tulsi Gabbard for a minute, though, Andy. Here's a sitting member of Congress who was a veteran of the Armed Forces Committee, and a few months before Trump wins the election, she's put by the faceless blob of the federal government on a no-fly list. I mean, she's got a chip on her shoulder too, and the Democrats put it there.
Tom, her stock rising.
I mean, accused of being a Russian agent herself, by none other than Hillary Clinton, and a dupe of Bashar Assad and all of this. I mean, look, this is one of the, and I agree with you. I think, her stock was, she was excluded from some of these meetings, and there was talk that, she's on the outside, and her stock went down. So I think internally her stock has risen. And I'm sure Trump likes the way that she's been, sort of doing the rounds, and she's very good on television, and
not that the media's been covering the story, actually, Tom.
Well, if you're on Fox News, I guess she's been on there a lot.
Right. They want to talk about anything other than Jeffrey Epstein, it seems, Tom. And I don't know if it's working because, on the Hill, Speaker Mike Johnson is actually adjourning the House early, sending his members home for a month-long break in order to avoid a vote on releasing the Epstein files. And these are Republicans who are pushing for this vote. I guess the Epstein story won't go away.
It is not going away. It seems like it might have subsided a little bit. And then you had this news that the House actually is going to, and the Justice Department is going to interview Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. And then you had this episode in the House yesterday. So I think Mike Johnson, you're right, wants to get out of town and hope that, over the course of 5 weeks that the temperature gets lowered, and when they get back, it'll be not as big of a headache for him. But I don't know. Maybe that'll work. Maybe it won't. This seems to be an issue that a lot of people are interested in. Obviously, Democrats are doing their level best to keep it as front and center in the news as possible. While, as you mentioned, Trump's talking about everything but this, because it is an issue that has been very thorny for him with respect to, his base. And so we'll see whether Mike Johnson's ploy works or not. But I think he's just happy right now that he can get home and take a little time off. But a lot, we'll see how many of these Republican members get an earful from their constituents when they go back home on this issue.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that the idea was that to go home 6 months, into the administration, they were going to sort of, take a victory lap, and then they were going to be pushing the big, beautiful bill, Carl. I mean, that seemed to be the assignment, was to sort of get educate the American people about
which they need to do also.
Yeah. And now are they going to go home and just, are these House members just going to hear about Jeffrey Epstein for the next month?
No, they're not, unless they are witless enough to hold town hall meetings. No,
Get out of town, go to your beach house, turn off your phone.
I think what Sam Rayburn Johnson wants to happen is for these members to go home and, get out of the, circular firing squad of Washington, D.C. and get out where real people are. And realize if you get off Twitter and out of D.C. and off cable news, you realize how few Americans care about this story and how they still care about the things they always cared about: the economy, good governance, peace. That's my guess is what he's hoping for. I don't know whether it will work. You guys seem to be working against him. You're making me talk about this story virtually every day on our show.
Well, Tom, this is Rachel Blade writing in Politico about the Democrats, saying she says this. She says congressional Democrats appear to have finally found their mojo in sticking it to the White House by seizing on the Jeffrey Epstein saga. Unlike in the past, senior Democrats have shown a surprisingly nimble ability in recent days to pivot to the GOP's vulnerability du jour, threatening to force votes, exposing a divided Republican Party. Have the Democrats, is this really where the Democrats have found their footing?
That seems a bit overwrought to me, don't you? Again, we talked about this before. Jamie Raskin going on Morning Joe and trying to, talk, all he wants to do is talk about Jeffrey Epstein and then literally becoming speechless like a drooling moron when Joe Scarborough asks him, well, you guys were just in power for 4 years. Why didn't you, if this was such a hot issue, why didn't you guys do anything about it? Why didn't you release these files? You were running the entire government. And he has no answer. None of them do, because they didn't do anything about it. This is purely political. It is a boon for them. There's no question, because it just absolutely ties Donald Trump and his administration in knots. And I think look, if you look at Trump's approval rating, his disapproval rating's gone up. And part of that is because I think of slippage among Republicans and MAGA voters who don't like the way that he's handled this particular issue. It's the first issue where he's really run into some real resistance on his side and disappointment from his own base on the way that he's handled things. And so it's a drag on him politically, and Democrats are certainly, as I said, happy to continue to, stick him with it as often as they can, but they do it without having any sort of moral high ground on the issue. It's just purely, like political theater.
Yeah. Andy, can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
I'm trying to imagine in my mind the voter who was intending to vote for Republicans for Congress because they remembered that under the previous Democratic regime, you had an open border, calamity Afghanistan, runaway inflation, high interest rates. But now you're going to vote for the Democrats because Donald Trump's administration has the exact same stance on Jeffrey Epstein that Barack Obama's administration had of Jeffrey Epstein. I don't even get the logic of that.
Well, I think what you're missing is the low propensity voter, which is the phrase du jour, or not du jour, but certainly last election cycle. And
are you accusing me of watching C-SPAN?
Yes,
being a nerd?
I think that a nerd would say, not that any of the three of us are nerds. It isn't that they'll switch votes; it's that they'll stay home, and that's the danger. That if people who don't come out for A, that they'll only come out for Trump, and B, they won't come out for a by-election because they're not that interested in politics. And this is just the kind of issue, I would argue, that a low propensity voter might care about, Tom.
You could be right. I remain skeptical.
Well, Carl just said it's not, when you get out of Washington, voters don't care that much about it, right? They care about the economy and other stuff. So that's his theory of the case. Look, this is a story that is unique in that it has been sort of in the public consciousness, maybe at the back of the mind for a number of years, and it keeps coming forward, obviously with his, I was going to say murder/suicide, and his
assisted suicide is, I think, what we're settling on.
It has developed this, sort of, I don't want to say cult-like status, but certainly mythology around it that has, I think, penetrated even down to folks who don't follow politics and don't care about what's in the big, beautiful bill, probably still know Jeffrey Epstein, his name, and what he's accused of, and that there's this list, and there are people. So it may be more potent than some people think.
Carl, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, was on Morning Joe today saying that Donald Trump would not fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell. That was followed by a Truth Social post from the president bashing Powell, but not saying that he'd actually try to remove him. Carl, this has gone on for some time now. Looks to me like Powell's job is safe, at least from the president for the time being. Do you see it that way? And what do you see in the future?
I think they're parsing language there a little bit, Andy. It remind me of is a scene in The Godfather where Tom Hagen goes into the prison to meet with the capo who turned against the Corleone family because he was misled about something. And he just explained to him, what the honorable thing to do was. He talked about Roman centurions. He never spelled it out, but he took his own life and he did the right thing.
Ooh, that's dark, Carl.
Saving the family. Well, what I'm trying to say is that I think they're trying to get Jay Powell to resign. I don't think they're trying to fire him because statutorily the president can't fire him. So I think they're trying to get him to quit. I still think they're trying to do that.
Well, I mean, look, Trump said yesterday in the Oval Office that, he's probably not going to fire him. And he said, look, he's gone in a few months anyway. His term expires in May of next year. And then he said, but he said, I think he's doing a terrible job, right? And I think he's always too late. And so Trump's going to continue to beat up on Jerome Powell. I think Powell has said that he's not going to quit. And so I think this is the status quo for the next 10 months or so until Trump can get one of his, nominees in there. He's looking at Kevin Hassett. He's looking at Kevin Warsh, are the two guys who are on the short list. Scott Bessent's name has been floated for that as well. So the other aspect of this is this investigation that's going on about the renovation of the, Fed headquarters that's like 30% over budget and costing like $2.5 billion or something. I saw someone, they said, they just built a new stadium in Buffalo for $2.2 billion. So what are they doing at the Fed office, and their allegations that they're using marble and all this stuff. And Jerome Powell said that's not true. So, and I think Bessent said he's going to go tour the facility, and they're trying to get to the bottom of this. I mean, that is something that could be potentially used. It's like the sort of Damocles hanging over his head that they could try and use to force him out of office if they wanted to try and go that route. But it seems like for the time being that they've decided that, they're going to still beat him up every opportunity they get. But in the meantime, that's about where it's going to end.
Yeah, I got to say on this building thing, I heard the $2.5 billion. I was like kind of shocked. That sounds like a lot of money. And then
that is a lot of money.
That the original budget, as you pointed out, 1.9. So it's 30% over. And this has been going on since it started in 2017. They broke ground in 2022, I guess. I don't know if you guys have done any renovation. I've done a fair amount of renovation in my life, and a 30% overage. I mean, that is nothing. That's pretty damn good in my view. I don't know. Maybe it's because we do this and my wife has expensive tastes, but if we can, if I get a job bid out and I get it come in and it comes in 30% over, I consider it a moral victory, Carl. I don't know about you.
I don't know what's wrong with this country. We're still waiting for that new Air Force One that Lockheed promised 20 years ago, and his way is double the budget. Things are so bad. This president went out and got a free plane from the Arabs. Can't we build anything anymore? I
don't hear these stories about how quickly we built the Empire State Building and how quickly we built the Pentagon and all of those things. It's just seems
Arsenal
like
a democracy and all that.
But,
but the other thing about this is that it's not really the cost overrun. I guess what they're trying to get him on is that he perjured himself in front of Congress by saying that it was on budget or something. Anyway, I don't think that's going to work. I think, Tom, what it seems to me is that this is an indication that Scott Bessent's, really has the president's ear. I think, you saw that in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend where he talked about this. And it seems like if there's someone who can sort of get the president to at least maybe not rein in the rhetoric, but not, not pull the trigger on something, maybe Scott Bessent's the guy.
But Bessent, I agree with that. I think he is probably, we talked about Tulsi Gabbard's stock. I don't think there's a person in the administration whose stock is higher than Scott Bessent. And that's been evident from the very beginning. But Bessent has been playing along with this, basically, they're going to make Jay Powell, if he wants to stick around for the next 10 months, he's going to get a 10-month colonoscopy on, with the stuff that he's been doing. And it may not be pleasant. They're going to make his life unpleasant.
That's a good analogy, Tom, because the colonoscopy itself is not unpleasant. It's that medicine that they make you drink. They're going to make this guy drink that medicine for 10 months. Why would he even stick around? Why not just resign?
All of our listeners who are under 50 have no idea
what we're talking about.
You will, folks. You will.
Well, on that note, I'm going to change the topic. And I want to talk to Carl about this AI action plan that was announced by the White House today. It's to sort of make America the leader in artificial intelligence. But the thing that caught my eye, and I imagine it caught yours, was this recommendation that that the AI that the government uses will, quote, be objective and free from top-down ideological bias. Kind of a shot across the bow of Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah, it really is. And we have a piece by John Lott. He did a thing where he, did the open AI and Grok, does ownership of guns lead to more crime? Yeah, absolutely it does. Just gave the sort of liberal answer. It's not an unreasonable position, but it's the Democratic Party's position. It's not John Lott's position. He's done as much research on this as anybody in the country. He thinks his theory is more guns, less crime, because you deter robbers, and I won't go into all of the thing and debate it, but the Sally Jenkins of the Washington Post had a similar experience. The thing just it regurgitates sort of the kind of politically correct or liberal view on something, and then if you call it out, it starts lying. So Trump, this is an ambitious thing the president's done. I'm on record as thinking we're way over our skis on AI already. But there was another thing in the president's directive. They said that it'll help American workers, and it won't. It has
some
to be
American workers, yeah.
Well, how is it going to do that? It's going to put American workers out of work. Is what it's going to do. But this was a very very optimistic view by the president. But somebody, at least in authority, is trying to get it on top of a handle on it. This was an executive order. I think there's going to need to be congressional action. There's going to be all kinds of Supreme Court decisions. AI it's here, and we're not. It's arrived before it was ready. It's this Frankenstein, and but I'm with you that it should be ideologically neutral, and I don't know how you do that, but now Trump's laid this out as the goal.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, my understanding is, part of what it's what you train it on, and what it goes out and
garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, and then if you let it read the Washington Post and the New York Times, you're going to get one view of the world. If you read something else, you get something different. So I mean, it's I guess it's trainable in that regard. But what do you make of it?
I mean, yeah, of course. In a perfect world, it'd be ingesting a variety of sources and spitting out information that at least provides both sides of the argument, or gives a very nuanced, objective look at something. But again, that all depends on who's doing the programming. And so I don't know. To me, it's an issue for sure. But what Trump was doing here, to me, is, look, as Carl mentioned, AI is it's the same thing that happened with the internet, right? And the question is, okay, who's going to be at the forefront of this? Who's going to regulate it? Who's going to be, and what Trump's trying to get ahead of the AI revolution and make sure that America is the one that is driving the regulatory aspect of this, and also, that we're the sort of driving the technological innovation, and it's not China. We want to be in charge of and be seen as the global leader on AI, because it's going to be a really, really important technology, across an entire host of industries and uses. We're already seeing how quickly people are adapting it here at home for everything.
Right.
So I think that's the ultimate goal here. And to Carl's point, though, this is just an executive order, and Congress needs to get involved here. And the problem with Congress is that we've got octogenarians and nonagenarians, people, they don't even use computers. I mean, this was the thing with the internet too. They need to be educated and or replaced with people who are a little bit more of the modern age. Yeah, we're replacing.
I never thought
that's
Tom
a great idea. Actually,
would take David Hogg's side. He just
Once those young Gen
it
Xers
does
in there.
bother me sometimes when you have senators that are so old and they're sitting around and they don't even know, again, they don't use computers, they don't know what's going on. How do we expect them to make regulations and laws concerning things like the internet and AI? It's a problem.
Yeah. All right, well, guys, on that happy note, we're going to leave it. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. Don't go away. More Real Clear Politics is coming up right after this.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Philip Wegman, RCP White House reporter, and I'm joined now by Washington Democrat Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. Thank you for joining us, Congresswoman.
Hey, very glad to be here.
So you introduced an amendment that would require the House Ethics Committee to develop standards to screen for cognitive impairment. Tell us about the problem that you were trying to address there. And have you seen personally any evidence of any of your colleagues in Congress unable or struggling to perform their duties?
Yeah, so what I hear back home, folks believe that Congress is being run by staffers and not the elected member themselves. And I think it's a very small number of offices where this is called into question. My amendment would not set up testing for everyone. But I was looking through the ethics rules, and I remember as a freshman being kind of terrified of oh my God, the rules are so specific on what kind of baseball hat I can accept. And you can only take food that's not offered you in a toothpick and all this crazy shit. There's nothing in there about how to evaluate an ethics complaint that a member is no longer the one making the calls in their office, that it's their staff. And there's a lot of anecdotal stories. There's a lot of for one, I'm sitting in appropriations committee hearings now, and there's a massive portrait of Kay Granger on the wall. If you recall, she was found living in a care facility while a sitting member of the committee. But it's not that this is about a specific member of Congress. That's not a systemic problem. The systemic problem is that Americans are losing confidence in our government and in Congress itself, and that there is a gap in the rules, that these bigger discussions about what would constitute an ethics violation. We're not looking for just kooky ideas. We're not looking for, somebody thinks that somebody's unintelligent. No, we're talking about, my amendment is really short. It just directs the Office of Congressional Conduct to develop a standard with which to evaluate claims that a member is not reflecting credibly on the House, with unable to execute the duties unimpeded by significant, irreversible cognitive decline. And so that's what we're trying to get at. Not people have all kinds of ideas and all kinds of values, and I believe that voters should be the ones deciding who's in office. I think we should have more information for them to make that determination with. And it doesn't change. It does not change the Constitution. There are only 3 ways for a member of the House to be removed. It's you can die, you can lose your election, or 2/3 of the body can vote to remove you. And it's impossible to get 2/3 of the body to agree that the sky's blue. This is not something that's been weaponized in the past. And I think the real risk is the lack of transparency and accountability of the body holding itself to the same standard that everybody else does,
So it sounds like you think the majority of members of Congress could easily pass any type of cognitive test. But have you seen anything? You mentioned former Representative Kay Granger. Have you seen anything there when you've seen a colleague struggle or something doesn't seem to be right?
Well, we've seen running a congressional office, you are very, it is, you ought to be you ought to be very focused on how do you orient the body to deliver on the priorities of your district, not policing each other. But I think in these cases where, there's been reporting on several different instances where this has been called into question. We saw it, we also saw it at the executive level during the presidential debates last November. And my constituents had a lot of questions about whether the president was the one steering the ship. Henpecking each other is not the goal. The goal is that this body is loyal to our system of government, that it's candid and honest and transparent with voters. And that, if staff wanted to bring a if somebody wanted to like bring an ethics violation, there's just nothing to do that with right now. It's just a huge gap in the rules.
And have you seen anyone that you think, if this amendment went forward and became law, that could potentially, face some additional scrutiny? You're there in conference, you're there behind closed doors, you're there at votes late at night. Do you see any of your colleagues, either Republican or Democrat, who have, ceded some of their authority to staff?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of folks who have questions about, it's rare, but when you feel like staff has to continually point to the line in the script for a member or something like that, like that's concerning. But it's not a partisan issue. It's not, and it's not an age issue. Like, I think we want a representative body. We want people who are, older and experiencing what it's like to, get these like robocalls or like to have these scam calls, or who are maybe using different kinds of medication that are designed for older folks. Or we want young people. We want people who have kids in daycare. We want people who are from all walks of life. And I think advancing these kinds of rules empowers a stronger body that's more representative and ensures like we are loyal to our communities and not to the status quo, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Your amendment was voted down last month in the Appropriations Committee, and you mentioned that this is a committee that was previously chaired by Kay Granger. I mean, I think that story shocked a lot of people, that for 6 months, a sitting member of Congress was in an assisted living facility. Do you think, and you've already noted that this is a bipartisan issue, this is about good government, not henpecking any individual, but do you think that congressional leadership in both parties is okay with letting someone who is diminished continue in the job, so long as it allows them to maintain their power?
I think it's easy to kind of get locked into this like political fight where it's just like, oh, like these are the people who are responsible for like ruining the country. No, it's these people. It's like, oh, I own an auto repair and a machine shop with my husband, and like it's so easy to get focused on just fixing cars and getting them out the door and getting the job done right, that you don't work on the business itself and kind of evaluate like, oh, do we need to do some more ventilation projects, or do we need to reevaluate contracts on payment processing or whatever it is? That's a mistake. That is how you lose your business, right? You have to not just do the job that like is directly in front of you, but also have a lens on the business itself, the body itself, the function. And so I understand why it's easier to think about things that feel more time sensitive. But if you don't make room for these larger discussions, you'd go bankrupt. You wouldn't be able to keep doing the thing you want to do, fixing cars, or passing legislation that makes people's lives better. And so, like, in some ways, I feel like it's important for, especially when things are in such a gridlock. It's like, well, if we can't agree on exactly what our tax policy should look like, or how we should address our national health, like we can have conversations about how to have a body that's overall functioning stronger and is better equipped to have those discussions on policy.
I'm curious if some of those conversations aren't happening out in public, are some of them happening in private? Have you had colleagues pull you aside and acknowledge that this is a problem, that maybe staff are taking a little bit too much control, that maybe some of these members are staying on probably longer than they should?
Yeah, people have those conversations, and I think it's also it varies. I think a lot of members might just get that. It's common. I think every office has people compiling news clips for them to make sure that you're seeing a spectrum, and often that's done by interns. And I can totally see an intern not wanting to include a news clip about some of these controversies of a colleague. So I think there can be a lack of awareness on all of these things. We do, you do see these conversations in the cloakroom, or in off the floor. And I think that the way to make it not personal and not about an individual member is to have a transparent standard to evaluate these claims, and that's how you kind of get past what could be just gossip and what could actually be real. And I should say, like, ethics committee is different than every other committee. It is split 50-50. It's not controlled by the majority. So it's a committee where these things are much less likely to be partisan. It's a determination to be nonpartisan. It's also it does not change the Constitution. Even if they found an ethics violation, they don't have they cannot just remove a member. That would need to come to the entire body, or it's information that would potentially be voted on to go public and be shared with a constituency.
Just a final question here. You've been very generous with your time. There's a lot of new reporting from Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson about President Biden, and you mentioned him earlier. What we've learned is that, specifically his inner circle wasn't just hiding him from the public, but from the cabinet. Looking back, do you share the doubts of your constituents about who is making decisions for the country? And, setting aside personal motivations of President Trump, is an investigation into the Biden auto pen, is that warranted?
I certainly had those. Look, like, I don't view my duty as an elected representative to dip my spoon into kind of elections and campaigning. But when I heard so much concern from people at daycare drop-off or at the grocery store or at church or whatever about who was calling the shots within the elected administration, like, that was why I felt like I needed to speak out on that. I haven't looked as much into the auto pen stuff. I think that it's
does it concern you?
What I've heard about it concerns me. I think I don't know, the timing with all of the right was like we're leaving votes. We're leaving early because they don't want to see this discharge petition on Epstein files come up. Like, I can't say, I'm not a political strategist. I can't say why the auto pen stuff is being elevated now, but I think it's important that we're, like, transparent and honest with ourselves, and that we're making, we're providing clear information to voters to make these decisions, and not holding up a status quo that's corrosive.